Have you ever wondered how much it really costs to file for bankruptcy? You're struggling with debt, you can barely afford your rent, and then you find out that bankruptcy isn't free? What the heck? That feels impossible. Today, we're breaking down the real cost of bankruptcy, the hidden fees, and how to make the best choice for your financial future. Now, I remember when I filed for bankruptcy, I was like, how the heck is this so expensive? I mean, I didn't have that kind of money. And then I spoke to a lawyer who wanted to charge me $1,500 just to set up a repayment plan that I also couldn't afford. It felt like a trap, and honestly, it was kind of scary and overwhelming. Like, how am I supposed to get relief when I don't even have the money for the process? I learned through this that understanding your options is key, and that's what we're going to help you with today. Hey, I'm Ben, the co-founder of Upsolve, and you're listening to the Break Free podcast, where we help you tackle financial stress and build the future you deserve. While I do share my personal experiences and insights on this show, I'm not a licensed financial advisor or attorney. This podcast is meant to provide information and inspiration, but for personalized advice, please consult a professional. Now, in our last episode, we broke down Chapter 7 bankruptcy forms, what you need to know to file, what to avoid, and how to make the process easier. If you missed it, go check it out. Today, we're going to talk about how much it actually costs to file bankruptcy, the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 in real dollars, and how some people end up paying way more than they expected just because they didn't have the right plan in place. So let's get into it. Now, the base cost for filing for bankruptcy is determined by the courts. Chapter 7 bankruptcy costs $338 in filing fees, while Chapter 13 bankruptcy costs $313 in filing fees. These fees don't include lawyer fees, credit counseling fees, and other associated costs. Now, when I was filing, I thought, okay, so I need a few $100s, maybe I can figure that out. But then reality hit me when I saw all the extra expenses, like attorney's fees, which are the biggest expense of all. Hiring an attorney makes things easier in many cases, but it doesn't come cheap. The average cost for a Chapter 7 lawyer is around $1,500, and the average cost for a Chapter 13 lawyer is between $3,000 and $4,000. The problem is you usually have to pay most of this up front, and if you're struggling with debt, struggling with your finances, where are you going to get this money from? I certainly couldn't. I know that's the case for a lot of people who are also dealing with debt. Many Upsolve users have reported this as well. So the lawyer I spoke to, he asked for all this money that I didn't have, and I couldn't afford a plan, because he was trying to get me on a Chapter 13, which would be a negotiated repayment plan. I couldn't afford that. I knew that my expenses were about to increase and that my revenue was about to decrease, and so I wouldn't be able to deal with even the repayment plan. So I was like, I can't afford the lawyer fees. I can't afford the repayment plan of a Chapter 13. What do I do? I was stuck, and it felt terrible. Now, there's additional costs beyond the attorney fees. For example, there's credit counseling courses that you're required to take, and those can cost between $50 and $100. You have to take those before Chapter 13 and before a Chapter 7. Others are financial management courses, which also range from $50 to $100. And there's additional administrative fees depending upon your case and what happens as you go through the proceedings. So there's another cost that I think a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to bankruptcy, and it's one that I think is really important. And that is the hidden costs of unsuccessful bankruptcy filings. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is starting with the wrong type of bankruptcy and ending up paying more in the long run. And what usually happens is you start in a Chapter 13 and you end up in a Chapter 7. Now, a Chapter 13 has a really high failure rate. About half of the people who start one don't complete their payment plan, which means that their debt doesn't go away. That means they lose all the money they paid and they have to start over, often switching to a Chapter 7 and paying all the fees over again. So here's a real cost breakdown of the two. A failed Chapter 13 bankruptcy could cost $313 in filing fees, plus around $3,000 in lawyer fees. That's already over $3,300 spent. Then if that plan doesn't work and you switch to Chapter 7, you then have to pay another $338 in filing fees and around $1,500 for a lawyer. That brings the total cost to over $5,000. $5,000 when you were struggling with your finances so much that you couldn't pay your bills in the first place. That's insane. And this is why it's so important to get it right the first time. So let's look at which is more affordable, Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. For many people, Chapter 7 is more affordable in the long run, especially if Chapter 13 isn't the right fit. With Chapter 7, the total estimated cost is around $1,800, assuming you work with an attorney, while Chapter 13 easily can cost over $5,000, especially if it fails. So if you're in a situation where Chapter 7 is an option, it's worth considering because it tends to be simpler and more successful. So with the Chapter 7 process, You can actually do this through Upsolve's free online tools, and I'll show you this now. Okay, if you go over to upsolve.org, you can launch our free tool right here that'll help you choose the right debt option for you. And if you're eligible for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, we help you prepare and file the forms for free, meaning no $1,500 lawyer fees. So you can go through this process, you can get a packet of completed forms in your hands that are reviewed by paralegals. You can take that to court, you can file. 90+% of our users have a successful filing once they go through with it, meaning you can avoid that $1,500 fee. So if you choose Chapter 7, not only are you able to avoid the potential downfalls of the Chapter 13 and the long repayment schedule, but you're able to do that for free with Upsolve. So highly encourage you, head over to upsolve.org, take a look at that. Also, take a look at this article, which is linked in the show notes. For those listening to the audio-only version, it's an article on upsolve.org, costs how much does it cost to file bankruptcy, and it will break down the costs that we mentioned in this video. Now, we talked about a lot in this video, or audio, depending on how you're listening to it. So let's break down the key takeaways. Number 1, bankruptcy isn't free, but knowing your costs can help you make the right decision. Number 2, attorney fees are often the biggest expense, and you need to plan for them. Number 3, many people pay thousands more than they need to because they file Chapter 13 but don't complete it. Number 4, Chapter 7 is often the more affordable and successful option, but it depends on your situation. And number 5, Upsolve can help you prepare and file your Chapter 7 forms for free. You'll just have to pay the court fees, assuming that you don't qualify for a fee waiver, which is something we'll talk about in a future episode, which would remove those as well. Now, in the next episode of the show, we're going to dive into a huge topic. I would argue one of the biggest on social media, and that is what happens when you don't pay debt collectors. This is one of the most misunderstood topics online, and trust me, most people talking about it on social media are completely wrong. Now, I want to reiterate that, completely wrong. I see a lot of people saying, oh, if a debt collector is asking you to pay them, you don't have to pay them because you don't owe them that money. That may be the case in some rare situations, but most of the time, if the debt collector legally purchased your debt, you have a legal obligation to pay them. They can sue you, take you to court and win, and then garnish your wages. So if you don't want to have that happen, take a listen to the next episode, figure out why many people talking about this, if not most people talking about this online, are wrong. And we'll have that episode on Monday morning at 5 a.m. Get the truth. Also, don't forget, this coming Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, we're hosting a live YouTube webinar. We do these weekly, and we're having debt settlement expert Michael Bovey on. If you've ever had questions about settling your debts for less than what you owe, like we talked about in one of our past episodes, this is your chance. Visit the live page on our YouTube channel, sign up for that webinar, and ask your questions. Michael's an incredibly experienced expert, and we'd be happy to help you. Now, if you found this episode helpful, make sure to subscribe to the Break Free podcast. Quick note, going forward, the podcast is just going to be released weekly on Mondays at 5 a.m. We're going to occasionally release additional episodes during the week, but we want to make sure that we keep the high quality without overwhelming you with content. I like to talk. I send out episodes very often, and I think the 3 times a week thing was a little bit too much for some people. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, and let's break free together. I'll see you soon for another episode.